Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to The Goal of the Wise. As always, I'm your host, Ardian Al-Mahdi.
And I'm Hussam Al-Mahdi.
And I'm Jamil Al-Mahdi.
So, on the previous episode with The Goal of the Wise, but before I get into it, I want to remind you guys to scan the QR code on the screen, which should be coming up right now, and you'll be able to download The Goal of the Wise for yourself, which is available in multiple languages such as English, Spanish, German, French, Arabic, and other languages that are right now present and hopefully more to come in the near future. We also have the manifesto that talks about what our goals are and talks about what it is that we are here for and what the Mahdi is here for, and how it is that we should go about building a divine just state on the earth. So anyway, without further ado, let's get back to what we were talking about yesterday. We were talking about how God is the one who establishes the country, God is the one who establishes the king, God is the one who inserts the ruler upon the earth. Without that ruler, we would not be living in a state of justice. And, just as Jamil brought up in the past episode, there is something, there's a hadith that talks about the state of Cain and the state of Adam. In the state of Adam, God is worshipped openly, but in the state of Cain or in the state of Satan, God is worshipped in secret. And the Adamites, for thousands upon thousands of years, from the time of Adam up until now, have been worshipping God in secret until this very day in which the Qa'im of the family Muhammad, the author of this book, Abdullah Hashim Abbas Sadiq, has come out now revealing all of this great knowledge, and now we are worshipping God in the wide and open. We also want to play for you guys a clip talking about a hadith that we mentioned previously, but we want to emphasize on this hadith and how important it is in our day and age. Let's play the clip.
Amr ibn Shimr narrated that Jabir said, "A man entered upon Abi Ja'far al-Baqir, peace be upon him, and said to him, 'May Allah keep you healthy. Please take these 500 dirhams from me.' So Abu Ja'far, peace be upon him, said to him, 'You take it, spend it on your neighbors from the people of Islam and the poor ones from your Muslim brothers.' Then he said, 'If the riser Qa'im of the Ahlul Bayt rises, he shall divide equally, and he shall be fair to the people. Whoever obeys him has obeyed God, and whoever disobeys him disobeyed God. And he is called a guide, because he guides to a matter which has been previously hidden, unknown. And he shall bring forth the Torah and the rest of the books of God out of a cave in Antioch. He shall then rule between the people of the Torah by the Torah, and between the people of the Gospels by their Gospels, and between the people of the Psalms, Zabur, by their Psalms, Zabur, and between the people of the Qur'an by their Qur'an. And the money of the world is gathered for him, from the inner of the earth and from the top of it. And he shall say to the people, Come to that which you cut ties with your families over, and that which you spilt blood over, and that which you did what God forbade over. And the riser Qa'im will be given what no one was given before him, and he shall fill the earth with justice and equity and light, as it had been filled with injustice and oppression and evil."
Okay, so we have a very, very clear narration here that basically points out for us and indicates for us, as we talked about yesterday, how the Qa'im, when he rules, the people in his state, in his country, will be people of different faiths and beliefs. So we can see clearly here, not only would it be that the Muslims are in his state, but the Christians will be in his state and the Jews will be in his state, which shows that they are living equally, that there is a freedom of religion in the state of the Qa'im, and that they are allowed to practice their beliefs and they're allowed to implement their laws. So, the law, for example, of marriage for the Christians would be implemented. The laws of marriage for the Jews would be implemented, and the laws of marriage for the Muslims would be implemented. So, everyone, cannot now say in that country, in the state of the Qa'im, that hey, he's not allowing me to practice my religion. He is not allowing me to adhere to the laws of my religion and covenant. But now we have that the Qa'im rules by that. That basically shows us, I'm sorry for talking so long over you guys, but like that basically shows us and indicates towards us that the past prophets and messengers, the Qa'im of the family Muhammad validates their call, their claims, and what came before him. But we also know that half of the world adheres to the Abrahamic faith, but the other half of the world doesn't. You still have Buddhists, you have the Hindus, you have people who adhere to Confucianism, Taoism, and the likes of. So what about these people then?
Of course, that the Qa'im alayhi salatu wasalam, if he's going to rule the people by their books, then obviously he would rule them also by their books. It doesn't make sense that he would, treat certain parts and other parts of the religions of God without the same justice. Now, this would prove then that there is prophets and messengers that were sent to other nations as well, which is something that the Quran actually mentions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that every nation, every tribe in the world, on the planet, God had sent prophets and messengers to. So it's not just the Middle East, it's not just the Abrahamic covenants that we know about and are famous around the world. It's in fact other religions around the world that were also sent by God, originated at least minimum by God, and happened to them what happened to Islam, what happened to Christianity, of denominations and splits and different differences between them, and different people coming up to the mics and saying, I am the one who represents Taoism, I am the one who represents Buddhism, I am the one, let me sit down and let me teach you about Zen Buddhism and all these different kinds of isms, right? So the idea is that the original form of these of many of the religions in the West and in the East are actually from God. Just they were drifted and deviated from the true path.
Exactly, and I think that's definitely something that is unique about our call, because Ahmad Hassan Abu Sadiq alayhi salam, our Imams, our Ahmadis that are with us and teach us, are here to clarify and to clear up the mess that all of these false claimants after the true appointee was appointed, the likes of when Paul and the fake popes stole from Peter, the likes of Abu Bakr and Umar seen from Imam Ali, to this day and age where we have like these Marja Taqleeds and all of these grand ayatollahs and these crazy titles that they actually stole from Imam Ali, but that's a whole other topic. And the likes of the Saudis, which we mentioned yesterday, is these custodians of the two holies that have completely warped and changed the face of these religions and the meanings and the sort of knowledge it came with. And that's why in the Goal of the Wise, Ahmad al-Hassan confirms for us that each, the 99% of religion, all of these religions individually are false now, are corrupted. And he's here to obviously clarify that and to bring back what is true within those religions. And the fact that he rules with the books of those individual religions just shows and confirms that all of these prophets and messengers, or people that are mentioned in these holy scriptures, are actually people of God. So I think in the Quran is under 30 prophet messengers that are narrated, but in the Bible, the Torah, there's many more. And as you said, in Eastern, Western religions like Plato, Socrates, etc., Buddha, Krishna, Arjuna, all these prophets and messengers are real prophets and messengers under the umbrella of God, and most of these would fall under the Noahic covenant, which I'm sure you guys covered in great detail.
Yes.
Because after Noah, the Abrahamic line, all those prophets and messengers fall under that. So we're here to clarify that obviously these prophets and messengers are from God, and there are truths and knowledges that are true within those religions, but because of all of the isms and schisms, as you mentioned, these religions have become, again, 99% corrupt in this day and age, but there are truths and are true prophets and messengers that belong to us and that we're claiming and confirming that they are sent by God.
In fact, the Quran says very clearly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned some of the stories of the prophets to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, and there are other stories which he didn't actually tell him. And the fact that we know from the hadith that there's over 124,000, there's 124,000 prophets, messengers were sent to humanity. So who are these guys?
And exactly, and that's something that Prophet Muhammad vouched for, and he confirmed, because Abu Dharr, he asked him, he said, "O Messenger of Allah, how many were the prophets?" And he said 124,000. Then he asked him, well, then from those 124,000, how many of them were messengers? And he said, from them, 313. So it's impossible for people to now exclude anybody outside of the Abrahamic faiths because, you know, and we actually have a whole list of prophets that Abu Salih had listed that we find from the Quran and that we find from the Torah and the Bible. And the number really comes out to at least 66. So now we're missing still a grand total of those 124,000 prophets. We didn't even scratch the surface, honestly. So who else were there? Well, Abu Salih actually labels out and pulls down for us some of them who we had no idea about, because this was something that Muslims, unfortunately, never bothered looking into. But when you actually look into these calls and these personalities, for sure they were prophets. And as you said, you know, we have the likes of Buddha being a prophet. You know, Buddha himself, this guy who like everybody knows is like a figure of meditation, a figure who disowns the world completely, disowns the dunya, as like the Muslims are called to disown. He disowns the dunya. He is the one fasting. He is the one meditating. He is the one contemplating over life and death. He is a prophet that was sent to the subcontinent of India, and there's no mention of a prophet from India, from the Abrahamic faiths, because as you said, and as Jamil's pointed out, something very interesting is that some of these prophets were sent to people who were not under the Abrahamic covenant or the Mosaic covenant. These were people away from the civilization of Bani Israel, from the children of Israel. And because God is merciful, that although they did not have a covenant with Him, He still sent them prophets and messengers in order that this way they may know God, and that God's people from all corners of the earth may also join with Him and elevate.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the revelations that are inside the books from Abu Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam is the revelation that Buddha is actually in fact a prophet of God, and he was not just an enlightened being who just walked on the face of the earth. In fact, you can see the remnants of monotheism inside of Buddhism once you start to research into it and you actually look into and read for Buddha. You'll find there is like he was calling to the light. He was calling to the light, which is one of the attributes of God, Nur, right?
Yes.
Enlightenment. He was calling to enlightenment and the source is one. So he spoke it in their own language, in their own tongue, mother tongue. You have also another revelation that Abu Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam has revealed, is that Krishna is also one of the prophets and messengers of God, who is in the Hindu side of the religious spectrum. So you'll find that Krishna also, if you read for Krishna or you read the stories in Bhagavad Gita or like Mahabharata and Ramayana, all these different holy texts, then you see that it is impossible for us to actually ignore the wisdom that comes out of these books. They are amazing books. They are books that have in it quite a lot of enlightenment. So to deny them is similar to a Muslim who comes to us and saying, I want to deny the Bible just because I find some corruptions in it. Missing out, therefore, on the parables of Jesus Christ, ﷺ, massive mountain levels of wisdoms that are mentioned by the Prophet's stories and the Messenger stories, and what happened and what kind of relationship, what they had with God and stuff like that. So if you deny for the sake of denial, just because your scholars, for the sake of argument, did not really tell you that this is a prophet and that's a prophet, and out of fear of being misguided or whatever, then you should also like be fair enough to deny your own religious scholarly kind of studied the religion, because they also have the same arguments as them, you know. So the idea is that you cannot just deny. The Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pointed it out for us, and he said, "Take wisdom, even if from China." What does that mean?
I mean, obviously, he would not be saying that unless there was pieces of knowledge or truth, or even past prophets and messengers from China, or this basically the continent of Asia that God had previously sent.
Exactly, and it's very true what you say, because they do come with a lot of knowledge that is practical and that is enlightening, which is why they're enlightened beings and stuff. So there is something that I always love is this topic of overcoming the self and the ego. and the fact that like the big, I guess, poison within our own selves and hearts is this idea of like selfishness and this ego and overcome your nafs, and the sayings that, you know, the greater jihad is overcoming yourself, right?
Yes.
And when you look into the Bhagavad Gita from Hinduism, you see this image that is usually depicted with Arjuna and Krishna.
Yeah.
If we can just bring up the slide, because we prepared it so we can just sort of dissect it a little bit. And it's obviously here you can see a picture of 5 horses with 2 beings on top, right? And this is a depiction of a small verse from Bhagavad Gita, which says, "The mind is very restless, turbulent, strong, and obstinate. O Krishna, it appears to me that is more difficult to control than the wind." So if you look at this image now, you see that the chariot is the body, and the 5 horses represent the 5 senses: the tongue, the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the skin. The reins are the driving instrument, which symbolize the mind, and the driver is the intelligence, and the passenger is the spirit soul. And if you look, the spirit soul is behind the driver. So it means that the physical body is the one that is controlling the soul in effect, if you're not allowing it to control you. And what Arjuna is saying here is that basically the mind itself is very restless. It bounces between different lusts, different desires, different thoughts that are not always sort of selfless. They're not always sort of like the highest level of thoughts. They are sometimes very basic and almost animalistic, you could say.
And the image that you that we played up on the screen is a very interesting image, because, you know, those 5 horses are basically the senses of the human body,
Exactly that.
and the rider, the main rider, is the one in control. So you could say it's the ego, it's the personality, it's basically us.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you have this thing in the background that's actually kind of like shouting, right? As like trying to tell it, which is a soul actually, trying to tell it, hey, you know, go left, hey, go right, don't do this, don't do that, you know, or do this and do that rather than doing this. So basically, Krishna and Buddhism and Hinduism, especially Hinduism, is a religion based on, as you said, the combat of the self, rather than just the external conflict, which everyone knows Krishna and Arjuna, who, by the way, Arjuna is also a prophet. Krishna and Arjuna had fought against the opposing side, and they did have a physical conflict. But the Bhagavad Gita is a conflict mainly talking about oneself and one's duty towards God, one's duty towards humanity as well, and how both of them are pretty much intertwined with one another. And it's fascinating how actually this is a religion that is actually a monotheistic religion in nature when you read the Bhagavad Gita. And when you look at Buddhism, they are both monotheistic religions that both call towards the supremacy of God. Because who was a ruler at that time? Well, the ruler at that time, in the time of Krishna, I mean, Krishna made it very obvious. He was not ashamed of it. He was the ruler.
Exactly.
He was the one that the people had to come back to. He was the one that he described by himself in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, that Arjuna, the goal is me. You have to obey me. I am the dharma. I am the knowledge. I am the duty that you are meant to perform.
Exactly.
Which is exactly how the Ahlul Bayt talk about themselves. That, guys, those who do not pledge allegiance to the Imam of their time die the death of Jahiliyyah.
Exactly. And what's interesting is because, you know, you see in this picture, if we can just bring it up again, you see these 5 senses, which like the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the skin, etc. And the Imam says to us in this day and age, you know, basically ignore your own senses and let me be those senses for you. So that basically let me be your eyes, let me be your ears, your nose, your senses, so that he can rule this body for you with the soul that obviously he puts into, etc. With the eye of God, so that, you know, you're free of this ego, this self that is weighing you down, and you can let the soul flourish, and in that way God works through you.
Exactly.
And
like the soul in the back of the chariot in that image.
Exactly. So if the chariot, if there's the body in the image just kind of chills out and lets it be guided instead of it guiding, then this is how we, you know, establish this kingdom of earth that we keep talking about. And just on the last point of Hinduism, I just wanted to mention, because these religions do have a lot of different truths. They believe in these different time cycles, right? And right now we're in the Kali Yuga, which is basically what they would describe as the most immoral time period. And this is what we see today, this immoral time period where we're again on the brink of destruction, World War III, all of these different calamities are hitting us. And for us, we would call this like the end time sign. So
for sure.
It's a very similar sort of concept that we see right now happening, and something that we believe in from Islam, and something that they also believe is the same sort of time period that they have in that religion.
Exactly. So I think like another point that was really interesting to link when you guys were talking, they were talking about the brothers were talking about this fighting of the self or the senses and stuff like that, where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not far from that.
Exactly.
He was saying exactly that. He was, in fact, when the battles used to happen and the fighters would come back from the battlefield, he will tell them, welcome back from the minor jihad or the minor struggle, against the, say, physical like Jahiliyyah enemy, versus he says, welcome back from the minor struggle to the greater struggle. So you can imagine in the narrations, in fact, the Sahaba at that time, when they come back, they would be shocked. They would be like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Like,
we just went to war.
I just saw somebody die. I saw my friends die. Like all of the, I'm wounded, I'm in pain. And you're telling me that's a minor jihad? Then he said, yes, that is the minor jihad. Then they asked him, what is the greater jihad then? He said, it's the jihad of yourself, the ego, right? It's the jihad of this nafs, this self that's created by those senses. And Abu Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam goes into great details about the self, inshallah, in the future in one of the episodes we'll make. One of the chapters, in fact, is called the ego. So you will be able to dive deep. We will be able to discover this ego that has been talked by the prophets and the messengers, and how to fight it, how to combat it. Well, we have hints from the Prophet ﷺ, similar to others as well, as Buddha and Krishna has taught, that to fight against yourself, you have to do the opposite of what it wants. Like if it wants food for no reason, for no hunger, just for the sake of food, you have to not give it that. If it wants rest, then you have to give it tiredness. You have to give it the opposites of what it wants. That way it becomes tired, and then it submits to you. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in fact, when Aisha asked him about his self, he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has helped me against it, and it became a Muslim. So you could imagine this is not just some sort of a kind of hypothetical thing. This is a direct link between Islam and Krishna and Buddha. Like this is literally a direct link.
So that's practical too.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it is, and something that I would recommend for people is, and that's something that actually the Imam talked about, which is that actually the Bhagavad Gita is a great book, and it is a book that's pretty well preserved, really.
It's amazing, actually.
And I would actually recommend people, if they want to learn more about it, to also pick up the Bhagavad Gita and also take a look at what it's saying, and you'll be for sure enlightened to see some of the things that it has to say concerning God and concerning the self of a person and one's duties towards God. It is a fascinating read. And I asked Abu Sadiq one day, actually, who was a founder of Hinduism, actually. He said, Ardian, you know who the founder of Hinduism is? And he said the founder is Krishna. Because many have debated over, like, okay, well, there's a person who wrote the Vedas, there's a person who wrote this and this and this, earlier texts besides the Bhagavad Gita. And he said, no, the one who actually formed Hinduism for what is known for today is actually Krishna, Prophet Krishna. So let's now go a little bit down, I guess east, down east, a little bit up north too, where we find that there's other prophets, right, who actually came from mainland China, which are the likes of Confucius and Lao Tzu, two contemporary prophets who lived at the same time, who were basically calling towards the same thing. They were calling towards a higher being. They also talked against the self or the dark self, and they also were basically what people would call at that time philosophers. So these two philosophers, who were actually prophets, came with divine wisdom and they came with knowledge. Confucius had compiled his own book called the Analytics, or the Analects, I believe it's called. And Lao Tzu came with a book called the Tao Te Ching, which he left behind for his followers afterwards, and it's actually an amazing book as well. It's a
full
very
of wisdoms for sure. It's packed
really
full of short wisdoms that would tell you exactly, and they almost the concept of God over there is the Tao. So it's like when you're talking about that in that tongue, because we cannot limit God subhanahu wa ta'ala to a single language. It just doesn't make sense, because He made these languages. So it's like there must be some wisdom behind that, right? So He's teaching different things to different nations, and then He said, "We made you different tribes and different nations in order for that you may get to know one another," and we'll get to know what that means in another episode.
And do you know what's actually crazy about Taoism, right? The very first chapter, if you read the first chapter with the understanding that the Tao is God, right, you'll find that it says something along the lines of the Tao that is spoken cannot be the Tao.
Exactly.
Pretty much like how we say in the book of Monotheism, or how Ahmad al-Hassan from him, his peace, talked about in the book of Monotheism, that God is indescribable. Whatever you can attribute to him is not truly him.
Yeah.
And that's actually my fascinating journey with the Tao Te Ching, is like when you actually read it and compare it to the teachings of Imam Ahmad al-Hassan and Abu Sadiq, you see that they're actually talking about the same thing. There's a lot of jam-packed things that you'll discover while reading the Tao Te Ching that is really relatable to the Abrahamic faiths. But the problem is that the non-working scholars of each day and age kind of pull you away from the Eastern thought and Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion, saying, hey, look, these are just pagans, these are people who are polytheistic, don't read their stuff, they're just corrupt individuals. But in actuality, they were monotheistic.
Yeah.
And I think some other controversial figures, that people... we're not too lenient with taking from, except for Western thought and Western philosophy, would be some European prophets such as Socrates and Plato and Aristotle.
Yeah, exactly. This trio of critical thinkers, great people of knowledge that they're often depicted as now. But again, Ahmad al-Hassan, Abu Sadiq, they've both confirmed for us that they're actually prophets sent by God. Again, under the Noahic covenant, and there to guide the people of that nation. Because, as you said earlier, everyone had a prophet and messenger sent to each nation, right? So, I want to bring up another slide, because one of the great things that is taught to us by Plato is this idea of a philosopher king, and this is what we would equate to is the divinely appointed messenger for the people of Plato, for the people of Greece in this area. And I just want to read the quote which it says there, and is basically what we're saying today, in other words. So it says, until philosophers rule as kings, or those who are now called kings and leading men genuinely and adequately philosophize, that is, until political power and philosophy entirely coincide, cities will have no rest from evils, nor, I think, will the human race. Yeah. And to me, this just screams what we were saying yesterday, the fact that, state and religion, or church and state, was separated. Yeah. Because they're saying until these two are united, until the man that is appointed by God rules over both sort of worldly affairs and heavenly affairs in terms of like your day-to-day rulings and your knowledge of religion, then you're going to be torn apart and torn in different directions.
Right. I think to dissect that a little bit further so that we can kind of understand it in our day-to-day life. What is philosophy? Philosophy in the original language is philosophia, philosophy, which is philo love. And philo is love, and Sophia is wisdom. Yeah. So it's the love of wisdom. What he's technically saying is that if the rulers do not start getting interested in wisdom and knowing wisdom, which is God, one of the attributes of God is wisdom, right? So if they're not interested in that and they're not really into that, like the world leaders that we have today for the sake of argument, then what's going to happen is that the wars, no city is going to be safe, which is what we have today. He was right back then and he is right today. So this is timeless knowledge, timeless wisdom that we have tapped into today. The idea is that Socrates, Plato, these brothers, these prophets, peace be upon them, they are still studied today in the Western world. Like even in today's time, if you go to the higher educations over there in the West, you'll find them being taught in philosophy classes day and night. Like the Republic, which we quoted from, the book of the Republic is actually taught in philosophy classes, and I had to take that book for the first time in my philosophy class. It's something that they actually teach, And so the idea is that the Western philosophers, we tapped into them right now. We also go into a bit further back in history, around in the same in the same area around. You find that some characters are controversial because today they were turned into mythological beings.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, there are beings that for sure people have looked at as gods, but actually Abu Sadiq confirmed that this is not really the case. They were not gods in the sense of like these mythological stories. A lot of these mythological stories that you hear about them are actually false, but the characters at least are true. Yeah. And those are the likes of, for example, in Greek mythology you have Zeus, right? And in the Egyptian mythology you have Osiris, you have Horus, and you also have from the Norse pantheons someone like Odin, for example. So, you know, that I think spins the heads of the people a little bit, because, hey, weren't these people who are worshipped and deified by these different groups of people?
Yeah, I think the idea is you have to keep in mind that throughout history, people always tend to change religions into something what it's not.
Yeah. Exactly.
So keep in mind, if you're a Christian, for the sake of argument, there are Shia sects that turned Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam into the absolute God. So over 1,400 period, you know, like a short period in time history, then they're turned into the absolute God himself. There is also, if you're Muslim or if you're anything else, they've turned Jesus Christ into a God.
Exactly.
Into God
and
himself.
it doesn't mean that Imam Ali is or like Jesus are false. It just means that the people afterwards deified them. And actually, even I believe it was Ibn Kathir, one of the Sunni scholars, made a commentary about one of the ayats of the Quran where it talks about how the people of Noah were worshipping a set of idols, and the idols are actually named in the Quran. And the commentary from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, actually, that Ibn Kathir recorded, showed that these idols that the people used to worship back in the day, they got the idea because these idols used to be past prophets and messengers that the people loved so much that they revered, so they wanted to keep their memory alive by making statues out of them. Which was fine, you know, there's no problems with making statues, but the problem was later on was people, because they forgot, they misunderstood why their ancestors made statues in the first place, they ended up worshipping these statues, thinking that they were
Canaanites,
gods.
in a way, they always turned into you know, fire worship or into a idol worship. So they don't understand the true religion of God. So when they see a statue, they start to think that that's actually the God himself. Or when they, just like when they saw the fire of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, when the two children of Adam sacrificed to it, they thought that was a fire, so we have to make a fire ourselves and worship it ourselves. The idea is that for Socrates, just a step backwards, the Prophet actually said that I am the Socrates of the age, of my time. So there is a hint for you that that Socrates is actually a prophet, and if Socrates is a prophet, his student Plato is automatically a prophet.
And there's two hadiths actually pertaining especially to Aristotle, where Prophet Muhammad, he said, I am the Aristotle of this nation.
Exactly.
And then there's another hadith that actually states what? It says that Amr ibn As, right, who goes to Egypt, right? And he comes back, and then the Prophet asks him, hey, what did you see there? He said, yeah, I found, he said, I came across a group of people, or said, I saw people that were gathering in circles, mentioning a man by the name of Aristotle, and then he cursed him. He said, may God curse him, right? Then the Prophet said, stop, O Amr. He said, Aristotle was a prophet, but his people did not recognize him as such. So actually, we even have hadiths now that Prophet Muhammad is confirming for us that this philosopher, who was a teacher of one of the greatest people of mankind, one of the greatest conquerors and one of the greatest military forces, Alexander the Great, who by the way was also a prophet, that Aristotle was a prophet indeed from God, who so if he's a prophet, well, who else is a prophet? Well, okay, he taught Alexander the Great, and he enforced Alexander the Great and encouraged him to go out into the world and to explore and to conquer. And he was taught by who? He was taught by Plato, who was taught by Socrates. So we have this link, we have this never-ending breakage of links of prophets succeeding one after the other. And speaking of idols, because we just mentioned idols, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the people were worshipping idols, especially Al-Manat, Al-Uzza, and Alat. These three huge idols that they used to worship back in the day were worshipped because of the same problem that the people at the time of Adam had, which was that when prophets come, they make statues out of them. Later generations, they forget why they do it, they deify them. Alat, Al-Uzza, and Manat were actually prophets from the past that history completely forgot about. And I think that's a beautiful revelation by Abu Salih from his peace, because now it actually shows that the reason why Prophet Muhammad was breaking these idols and telling people not to worship them was not because they were not real, that they were not real characters, but it was just simply also due to the fact that they were not God for them to be worshipped. And that obviously was a sin. It is shirk, it is association with God to say that, hey, these are parts of God that you must worship and prostrate and ask for after you make it into a statue of sticks and stones.
I think like you have also, we go to Africa in a way, we have like Horus. which is well known throughout history in Egypt, the history of Egypt. You have Horus alayhi salam. He is also revealed by Abu Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam to be a prophet of God, which also kind of changed the effect on those who are around the story of Horus and who were they? You know, like you have like Thoth, you have all these different also basically Egyptian gods, but they were not actually Egyptian. They were not gods. They were not a god himself, the absolute Allah, but they were prophets and messengers who were sent with knowledge, who actually, with time, they've spread knowledge, wisdom. They've elevated the societies that they've ruled over. There was no person who was sick or like hungry that slept under their rulership. Yeah. They were taking justice very seriously. You know?
And you know, something I want to clarify too is that sometimes in history, a prophet messenger is named, but actually that prophet messenger is also named from a different name and title in other civilizations. So for example, you'll have Noah, for example, who is Noah in the Bible, in the Quran. But for example, in Hinduism, he is named by something else. What is his name in Hinduism?
It's like, I don't remember exactly, but the idea is that yes, they have the concepts over there, the concepts that are like the flood, for example. The concept of the flood is mentioned in the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, right? So history records this event of the flood in different ways, in different tongues. Yes. It's just now, Abu Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, when he came, back then what they used to do, and even until today, people come up to the mics and say to us, hey guys, you know, like, what are you talking about? The Epic of Gilgamesh is much older than your Bible or your Quran. And these stories are mentioned in those tablets instead of yours. So we go like, of course they would be mentioned there because there were prophets and messengers at that time too who spoke about these stories to the people.
And these were civilizations that occurred after Noah, before Abraham came, and they all recounted the same exact stories, which is fascinating. And I think that's a proof in itself that there was a flood that took place, because all of these ancient civilizations that lived further away from each other, from the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, the Akkadians, the Sumerians, the Chinese, the Indians, they all had a similar story of a flood that took place, that only a few survived, that there is a new Adam or a man who is like Adam that now comes out of the ark, which is basically Noah, and repopulating the world and making new human beings. This is something in all myths, and this is something in all legends that they all agree upon. If it was not true, why would all of these civilizations come to the same exact story and conclusion? And you know, something that's also interesting too is that you know, the figures such as Osiris and Horus, Abu Sadiq actually confirmed that Osiris, the Egyptian god, is actually Enoch, Idris, and that Horus was actually the son of Enoch, who was Methuselah. And actually the eye of Horus was not like the literal eye that Horus had, it like popping out of his skull, but the eye of Horus was a birthmark that Horus had on his back, that Methuselah had on his back, and it was in the shape of an eye. So now we can actually come to an understanding that myth and reality, myth and fact, there is a link. You know, there is a link between the myths that we find in these different religions, relating to the truth. So there was an eye of Horus, but it was not as the people think. We see that these prophets and messengers over time, their stories unfortunately became exaggerated. They became a little bit like off course, and the people ended up deifying these figures into something that they were not. And go on.
You know, I was going to say, I think this is sort of, because we're coming to the end of the episode, there's a means in which Satan controls, the sons of Satan, the line of Cain, controls the narrative of what human history believes, because as we know, sort of history is recorded by the champions, and all the time a prophet messenger comes to whichever nation, they're always opposed, always oppressed, and this is why we've been saying that we're living in the state of Satan for so long. And you know, another topic or concept that is, you know, prevalent in, if you look deeply enough, all even Abrahamic religions, but is extremely well known in Eastern religions, is this topic of reincarnation.
Oh, yes.
And we are living obviously in the end times. This is the greatest time to be alive, something that I love to say. Why? Because this is the time that all of the prophets and messengers wish to come back in. And you know, we was talking earlier about, you know, statues and idols and even paintings and artwork. And one thing that, you know, people get onto us a lot about is the fact that we have paintings and statues in what we call Imam's Mahdi's Basilica, right?
Yes.
And there's a video, if you go and watch it on the Mehdi Has Appeared YouTube channel, that talks about Imam Mehdi's Basilica and explains why we have pictures and statues in Imam Mehdi's Basilica. And it's to depict that all of these prophets and messengers, whether they're Aristotle, whether they're Joshua, whether they're David, whether they're Noah, or we even have depicted like Imam Ali and Prophet Muhammad up there. So we have depictions of all of the messengers that have been sent by God, and we're coming back now to claim these messengers. Why? Because they have returned to go and help spread the message of Prophet Muhammad and all of these prophets and messengers, and tie together all of these truths that are scattered throughout these religions. And we're here to clarify and to clean up sort of the mess that the sons of Satan and Cain have made, and to come forward with the one true religion that encompasses all of it. And this is why, even as we started the episode, in a divine just state, we'll have like neighborhoods or areas in which people of those religions will be ruled by those religions, because in essence it's actually our religions. All of this human history, all of the religions, all of the prophets and messengers that have come from Adam until now, in effect, our family members, soul family, physical descendants, whichever way you look at it. This is the time that we're living in today, and that's why this chapter for me is so important, because it really ties together the fact that all of our history is related, because we said the Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of Noah, this is like the second Adam. So all of the prophets and messengers that come under the Noahic covenant are also in effect like our great-great-great-grandfathers and uncles, etc.
Exactly.
And this is why we have these beautiful depictions in our Imam Mehdi's Basilica, in the Basilica that we're so close to, and this is why we're proud to have them, and we're proud to write in our books that we have Buddha, Krishna, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Zeus as our prophets and messengers that we believe in and that we take knowledge from.
I think like one I just wanted to give a glad tidings for everybody who's watching and listening to this show. The idea is that Abu Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, while he mentioned these prophets and messengers by name, he's still yet to reveal for us the names of the prophets and the messengers that came from Africa directly. He mentioned some of them, but just stay tuned with Abu Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. Keep following, because sooner or later, and very soon inshallah, Abu Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam is going to reveal for us the prophets and the messengers who were sent to the African continent. And that, he said to us before, that's going to be very amazing and enlightening, because there were many prophets and messengers. What we mentioned is just very few. Keep in mind, the narrations say 124,000 prophets and messengers. So there are tons of prophets and messengers, peace and blessings be upon all of them, who came to the African continent from the African continent. And we will be so happy in that day that Abu Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam reveals for us those prophets and messengers. It's going to be one exciting episode, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah. And the fact that he comes out labeling out the names of unknown prophets from the past shows actually the knowledge that he possesses and the truthfulness that is of him, which is, he is Abu Sadiq, Abu Sadiq, the father of the truthful, and there has been nobody more truthful than him. He showed us who the past prophets and messengers were the past 9 years that we've been with him on the ground, and he's made sense out of their stories and showed us where the people had gone wrong. And it's beautiful, and it really complements the Quran, where it says, and for every community or a nation there is a messenger. When their messenger comes, the matter will be judged between them with justice, and they will not be wronged. So every nation had a messenger, but the Muslims, they failed completely and horribly to point out, okay, this verse says every community, every nation, every country had a prophet or a messenger. But okay, Tabyani, now where is that prophet? Where is that messenger that you can give us that came from China? They have no answer. That came from Greece. They had no answer. That came from Rome, from Sweden, from Africa. They don't have an answer.
Exactly. That's why there's a massive disconnect between Islam and the West and the East. It's just like, it doesn't make sense. You're telling me there are prophets that sent to our people, and yet you can't even name them.
Exactly. But that just shows how the Mahdi, right, who brings justice and equity into the world, not only just brings justice and equity into the world just for the Muslims and the Jews and Christians, but even for the people who are following these other religions that were at one point true, but then in the future became corrupted like every other religion, including, by the way, Islam. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching, and inshallah we'll be coming back on the next episode talking a little bit more about the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, what it is that we believe in, and the conflicts that the non-working scholars have with the Qa'im of the family Muhammad. Thank you all for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.